Hey everyone, welcome to the KE Report in a daily editorial recorded live from the floor of the New Orleans Investment Conference, sitting down with our good friend Chris Temple. Chris is the editor of the National Investor. And Chris, as much as people are talking about precious metals here, we want to shift focus to critical minerals, strategic minerals, whatever we want to call them. I'm getting actually kind of confused at which one is classified in which category right now. But the fact of the matter is, governments seem more supportive of projects, or at least they're talking that way. We've seen governments invest in some of these companies, and we have seen an absolute spike in share prices and now a pretty big retracement across the board. So this whole narrative around strategic minerals, critical minerals, how are you viewing all this noise in the bigger picture?
It is noise, Corey, and good to see you guys again here in New Orleans. Look, long term, there is no question of the fact that after decades of the U.S. not only outsourcing transistor radios and more modern electronics and sneakers and T-shirts and Christmas toys to China and other countries, we outsourced a lot of critical metals, mining, and especially their refinement, all the downstream industries. So we're trying to figure out how to get all of those things back again. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be quick. And so far, it's being done at best in kind of a scattershot way. You know, I got some people, even a few companies that I recommend in my newsletter that I like for the long term, raised their eyebrows at me early this year when I pointed to President Trump's, one of his initial executive orders of permitting reform and bolstering critical mineral supply, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I pointed out, and I went to the language. I said, okay, everybody on their website is taking a screenshot of the beautiful logos and the type and the fonts and the White House and everything on the executive order. But if you went down and read the damn thing and you get down to the last couple or three sections within that executive order, it gave you the two reasons why it's not going to work. Number one being that the president said all of these things that he wants to do are going to be subject to the appropriations process. Now, this was before he browbeat the Republicans on Capitol Hill into passing his one big, beautiful baseball, hot dogs, apple pie, MAGA bill and add 20 trillion more to our debt in the next decade. So there ain't going to be nearly enough to go around to fully fund the kind of things that we need to do in this country. Number two, it also stated in that executive order that his goals would still be subject to various agencies, state and federal both, and their processes that still exist, and a very litigious system that still exists where we badly need tort reform, okay? So it's going to slow these things down. You know, the three of us were talking off mic before you recorded, Corey, about the whole Fast 41 designation. And it's all good stuff, and I'm not disparaging the good that is coming. And look, this is the best policy tailwind and intention of our lifetimes here in the U.S. But that's still very, very far from the comprehensive industrial and economic policy that we need to make all of this work long term. All of these good intentions just aren't going to cut it. So, you know, the Fast 41 is nice. Resolution Copper got Fast 41 designation. What has it done for them so far? They still got to wait on the decision from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. You know, we just had a conference in the Twin Cities of a group Better in Our Backyard that I'm very involved with, which is some of our listeners, I'm sure, are familiar with it. And look, one of the things that we pointed out there is that there is still a big uphill thing. I first set foot personally on the NorthMet project in the Arrowhead of Minnesota a quarter of a century ago. Literally. Going back to June of 2000 was when I first visited there, all right? And there it still sits. One of the largest deposits, development stage on this continent of nickel, cobalt, copper, platinum group metals. And it's because, you know, these NGOs and people that don't want mining, most of them that come and file suit that live in California and they got blue hair and nose rings and whatnot, they live there, but they still have the ability, incredibly, to multiple times over file suit against these things. So there are so many different things that need to be done to get us headed with the proper amount of speed in the right direction, I'm not skeptical. I'm realistic. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of money to get there.
Well, Chris, I think you bring up some great points about the mixed bag that it is. It's nice to see the permitting fast tracking, but there's still the individual state governments to deal with and all the stakeholders. But in the last, let's just say 3 months, we saw a wild ride in a lot of commodities. Uranium already had a lot of fuel behind it, no pun intended. The 4 executive orders earlier in the year by the Trump administration also juiced that. But then we saw things like antimony, tungsten, rare earths hitting the radar screen because of the Chinese export bans and the United States' big focus on getting domestic supply. But as you point out, it's not just the minerals, it's the processing of them. So what do you make of the move we've seen in all of these niche metals that people didn't even care about last year, but now they're the flavor du jour?
Well, I want to distinguish uranium from the others because there are 2 different stories there, in my opinion, Chad. First off, the best commodity setup still, in my opinion, is uranium. There's a lot more meat on the bones of building or rebuilding our nuclear power infrastructure. There is infinitely more popular support. There are still going to be hurdles to start or restart uranium production in the U.S. There's still some environmental and permitting issues, but relative to everything else, it's in a much better situation. Number one. Number two, the macro situation can deteriorate, but there's still going to be the impetus to grow our ability globally, not just in the U.S., for more power because of all of the data center needs and things like that. And even though all this AI stuff is more hype than it is legitimate substance long term, it's still there, at least in some form. The good news is that the uranium and nuclear energy stories were already robust before anybody added AI to the mix and that much more need for power. So I'm not even counting on that, honestly, going forward. But these other things you mentioned, Shad, tungsten, antimony, some of the rare earth products and things like that, there was a tremendous bubble that built over many months in those things, not without some foundation. But I warned people, and you guys get my newsletter, I warned people probably a month or so ago that we were going to start taking some money off the table on some of these things. We sold wholesale a couple of stocks, thankfully, before they got cut in half or worse. And it was because in those themes especially, a lot of hot speculative money was coming into those things. And just like the gold chart recently, just like some other charts, the charts of some of these rare earth related, tungsten related, antimony related stocks were just going parabolic. So that's unsustainable technically to begin with. But again, if you had sense enough to understand that even though long-term things have not changed, short-term there are reasons for both President Xi of China and President Trump of the US to stand down, come out with some kind of a BS of a ceasefire. And it is as much BS as a legitimate ceasefire. Okay, that's going to cause all that hot money that came into these things to leave. And it was already happening before Trump and Xi met. And then it's accelerated since then. It's like rats leaving a sinking ship. Now, that said, it opens or reopens a lot of opportunities to get right back in if you didn't do it before. But you got to pick and choose. One company I especially like, I didn't recommend taking profits in it at all, but it suffered. But there are a couple of names I recommended where I already thought that on their individual stories, they were way out over their skis. And when they go back to where I first recommended them, I mean, I'll be kind of not mentioning a name, but one I had people in at like $1.50. We were selling it. Well, actually, I told people to sell too early, was take some money off the table. It was like $4. Then I said, all right, let's sell the rest of it. It was like $12, $14. And now it's $6. Last I looked, it's probably going to go to $2 again. And if it does, I might tell people to buy it again.
Some of these really are looking like they might do that round trip.
Yeah.
But now, Chris, this is such a political topic right now because politics is driving this. I don't want to get too political, but talking about timing, and you even said how long it'll take to build out this infrastructure. This has all come really on the hot take because Trump's in office and all of his executive orders and everything he's doing. He's not going to be in power forever. So is there a ticking clock for Trump's presidency that this stuff needs to happen then?
I think there is. You know, I was at a meeting of an energy company that's about to go public, the same SPAC incubator that took NuScale Power public, which is one of my most spectacular recommendations of the last few years. They're taking this company public. Donald Trump Jr. was a dinner speaker there, and among the comical things that we heard is him doing an impersonation of his own father during his speech. It was funnier than hell. Nobody was expecting that. But he made the comment, Corey, much to what the point of your question is, and said, look, there's a lot we're trying to get done now because who knows if there's going to be a friendly administration after 2028. So yes, here you've got a guy as imperfect as he is, and sometimes it just drives me nuts. I'll see Trump do something and I'm cheering. I want to, throw confetti. The next minute I want to strangle the guy, and sometimes it's back and forth multiple times in one day, depending on the issue. But to be fair, here's a guy who's stepping in here after this country was gutted in multiple ways for decades. He's got a narrow window, which hopefully is 3 more years and not just 1 more year, depending on what goes on between now and next year's midterm elections. And yes, he indeed is trying to do everything he can to get the ship righted, bail some of the water out, and get us on a decent path, okay? Is it all going to get done? No. Is everything going to be done correctly? No. But at least you got some guy in there who's flailing and trying. With some good people around him, I think generally speaking, he's got a far better cast of characters surrounding him than he did in his first administration. But if he doesn't let Europe suck us into World War III over Ukraine, and he can't make up his mind on that, if he does take some opportunity to do a little bit more to whittle down spending, which is still an elusive promise. I mean, he threw Elon Musk under the bus. And so that whole thing, that whole Doge effort so far has been thrown away for the most part. A little tinkering here and there, but not it's rounding errors, what they claim to be saving. In fact, guys, if you look at the official number for the fiscal year 2025 deficit, which ended in September, it was just a sliver less than the 2024 fiscal year deficit. So they didn't do anything yet, okay? I hope it's still going to come. We'll see. But yes, he is trying to do as much as he can now to get things headed in the right direction. It's not going to be enough. This debate and this cause are going to go on for years.
Well, Chris, when we're here at this conference, there's a lot of companies that are toting their book as far as their mineral resources. But in this industry of the critical minerals and strategic minerals, the big problem is processing. It's not something where this is a gold smelter and you can send it off and make a dory bar. To get rare earths processed, the downstream side of the business, there's a lot of interest there. With nuclear, it's not easy to get into production. There's about a handful of producers in the U.S. When you think about things like antimony, there's only one company producing right now, and it's a silver company, not an antimony company. So what do you make of the disparity between what we normally hear at these conferences of, hey, look at our resource, versus in this industry, it's really about processing downstream capabilities?
Well, you're absolutely right, Shad. And I think of all of the various individual moves that President Trump has made to try and support various projects in one form or another, the most transformational, if it's followed up on properly, was the MP Materials deal several months ago. And where that's concerned, it was a recognition for the very first time by the U.S. government, as far as I can remember, that the actual price of the finished product had to be divorced from global pricing, which is depressed deliberately so by China. And this is a big deal because one of the things I said, going back to my comments on that, one of the initial executive orders the president put out, and everybody declaring victory. I mean, you guys saw it too. I mean, as soon as those executive orders came out, you got all of these fledgling little exploration companies saying, oh, goody, we won. We didn't win anything because, among other things, the fact that you had those executive orders come out and the intentions to have permitting reform, well, that's nice, but that and $8 will get you an overpriced cup of coffee at Starbucks. Doesn't mean anything. Those executive orders didn't make a single development stage project in North America for nickel or copper or anything any more economic than they were before, because that's just one tiny piece of the puzzle. So, look, I think that going forward, there needs to be a recognition that the economics need to work. And more directly to your point, part of that was forgotten for a long time, but now is going to be paid attention to more because of the MP materials deal, and including the final pricing, including the downstream part of that deal. That's going to be reckoned with a lot more, because you look, for example, at copper. And when I was running one of the panels, besides my MC duties at the Better in Our Backyard meeting, one of the guys on a panel was the operations manager for Gunnison Copper. And I know you guys have been paying attention to Gunnison as well. Their technology that they're using, the Rio Tinto's technology to use a different form of leaching rather than smelter, that's big. Because we used to have, I don't know what the exact number was, but you go back a few decades, we had 18, 20 smelters operating in the U.S. Today we have 2. And there's got to be some ways that we come up with to have better processing, whether it's building new smelters. I mean, look at energy. We're not really talking about energy like oil and gas right now. I mean, we're about to lose 2 refineries in the U.S., which we can't afford to lose because there's a bottleneck already. There hasn't been a new refinery built in this country in like 30 years. So all of these things are wake-up calls to the U.S., generally speaking, that we got too fat and happy and lazy and stupid for a long time. And just thinking all of these different things that we take advantage of grow on trees. And yes, we had the regimen of globalization for a long time and other things with that allowed us to get these things done elsewhere. We don't have to look at how the sausage is made as Americans, have it in our backyard. Well, guess what? If we want these things in the future, and furthermore, if we want these things mined and processed properly with first world labors, first world economics, first world environmental standards, then yes, we're going to have to start having some of these things in our backyard.
That's going to cost a lot, too.
Yes, it will.
Costs are going to be very high if it truly does come this way without any government support. So, Chris, big picture then, with all the classifications of these minerals and metals is as strategic or critical, which ones, outside of uranium, we already know you believe in uranium the most, which ones do you believe have the longevity, are the most investable in the long term, and do you see any other ones being added to this list?
Oh gosh, that's a major. We could be here all afternoon on that potentially.
Where's the best investment opportunities?
I'm going to throw you a curve again because there is something that is still very strategic that isn't discussed on these topics or is critical. A barrel of crude oil. We had a situation, guys, where Joe Biden came to office as president, brought in Janet Yellen as Treasury Secretary, the first Treasury Secretary ever not nominated because of her financial bona fides, of which she has none, in my opinion, but because of her founding role as a board member of a global green energy outfit, that's going to fight climate change and whatnot. So they're going to come into office and get rid of fossil fuels, right? What happened? We had record production in the U.S. So now we have President Trump with his drill baby drill, and he's going to open up the new lands for drilling and et cetera, et cetera. What's happened to that chart of U.S. energy production? It's rolling over, and it's starting to decelerate a little bit quicker in the recent past because nobody is going to go out and produce more oil or future capacity when the oil price has been 60, give or take a little bit in the recent past. And here's where some of the president's scattershot policies have come back to hurt all of us, because when you want to, increase U.S. oil production and U.S. gas production and so forth, you got to look at all the costs for that. You got to look at the raw material input. So it's not, the president made a big deal out of doing away with the, paper straws. Well, how do you get oil out of the ground? You don't get a great big thing of Elmer's glue and glue all those paper straws together and stick them in the ground and suck the oil out. You use steel. Well, what did he do with steel? Raise the price with his tariffs. He didn't do the energy industry any favors, and that's why when you listen to the energy industry and get underneath his rhetoric, which we all love, rah, America first, we're going to produce more energy, but it's not reality right now. And so I would tell people to look anew It's a form of energy that we've used and become way too accustomed to, and that is oil and gasoline. Natural gas goes along with that, because I got to tell you, going forward, I'm more comfortable with those things right now, sitting here today, guys, than I am with copper, nickel, zinc, antimony, tungsten, or any of them. Because the next shoe that's going to drop is that people are going to realize this whole AI bubble is more bubble and fantasy than it is substance. And we're going to see the broad markets, which are way overdue for this, give back a lot of these bubbly gains that they've had. And then everything along with that comes to a stop. Now, there's going to be a variety of reactions to that. And I still think long-term, all of these commodities are investable because we need all of them long-term. And yes, however it comes about, we're going to have to go through more pain first because we don't learn. Nobody wants to have the foresight to realize that we need to be doing a lot more of these things now. We'll wait until there's a disaster, a market crash or something like that, and then they'll come up with some fiscal make-work stimulative program and maybe start to fund these things more. But still, we need people to really think outside the box and realize that these incremental proposals, the incremental steps that have been taken already, rah-rah for Ambler Road. I laugh at Thacker Pass and the whole Lithium Americas thing. That's a whole different subject. Rah-rah, double for MP materials and the rest. But we need multiple trillions of dollars now. Okay, you guys probably know or remember that I've been carrying water for a cause here in the U.S. for a national infrastructure bank. The price tag on that thing is $5 trillion, but it's not going to add a penny to the deficit or the debt, because this is a quasi-private bank that would be set up by legislation and use treasury securities that are already out in the marketplace as collateral and enable a massive investment. And they come up with this figure, guys, and this is, we're talking about just infrastructure that is decaying and needs to be repaired in this country. Most of their proposal is modeled on the American Society for Civil Engineers' latest report card, which is never very encouraging, that shows the multiple trillions of dollars we need for schools, our power grid, roads, bridges, all of these different kind of things, substations, okay? That's just for all of that kind of basic infrastructure. Now you got to consider how much needs to be added to get mines going, all of the stuff that's going to be needed for down the food chain and processing chain for those. The jobs that we need to have for these things. Because we don't have people that know how to do this. We don't send kids to school to learn to be a geologist or an engineer or whatnot. We teach them, how to change their gender and carry a protest sign, or they're protesting whatever they're told to protest. So we don't have the labor for all of this stuff either. So we're in a mess. And so it's going to take, we can't continue down this road of every now and then we get an announcement of an MP Materials or an Ambler Road. And again, this is great and it's better than nothing. But we're still bringing a pea shooter to a gunfight. And I hope that we don't have to go through a major crisis again before we realize that we got to do way more than what's been done and is being suggested.
Yeah, it is encouraging to see the government start to get behind it. But again, we'll see how long-lasting this is and if it extends past even Trump's presidency. But Chris, great chatting with you. Nice to see you at the conference. Again, Chris Temple, editor of The National Investor. Click the link in the show notes to follow along with what Chris is sharing with his subscribers. Chris, have a great rest of the show.
Yeah, you too. Good to see you guys.